Greetings, guys. It's Jurgis. Hopefully you're doing well. Well, the weather in the Midwest is still hot. It's in September, but the 10-day forecast calls for cooler temperatures, and I think we're seeing the tail end of summer, and I'm happy to hear that. And so we're getting ready to make a little trip to West Virginia soon, and we're trying to get the garden all watered in our absence, and hopefully the upcoming temperatures won't be too much of a stress while we're away. But one thing we were able to do while we're preparing for our departure is to go to the garden a little more often and earlier in the morning. And so this morning we were able to witness a beautiful transformation that took place, in which we had a beautiful caterpillar that had been living in our garden, eating from our garden, stay in our garden, and allow us to witness a transformation from when it became this basically a ground crawling insect to this beautiful butterfly. You know, the concept of being close to the ground, slow, methodical, looking for your food, to just a short time later, hour, to now be a different creature in which you have wings, in which you're flying, in which your perspective is so different. But this also kind of reminds me of this story of the young ruler in Matthew 19, in which this young man comes to Jesus, not questioning whether he's a Messiah, not even, I think, believing or understanding that he's talking to the Messiah, but that he's talking to a teacher, and he's earnestly asking, what must he do to enter the kingdom of heaven, to have eternal life? And Jesus, as he has with many different people he comes in contact with, knows their backstory. Whether it's a Samaritan woman by the well or this young man who's coming to him, he knows his soft spots. He knows our soft spots. He knows the things that we are keeping within ourselves. And so Jesus says, well, you must keep the commandments. And the man says, well, what commandments? And Jesus goes on to tell him, you shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall honor your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so as Jesus tells this young man this, Jesus knowing again this man and the weaknesses that he has, the young man turns around and says, well, I've done these things since my youth. And either the young man is, not reflecting upon his life thoroughly, or he's reflecting on his life from a superficial perspective on how he is perceived to other people, how he interacts with other people. Just earlier in Matthew, Jesus tells us the example of adultery, in which he says, if you look at a woman with lustfully in your eyes, you have committed adultery in your heart. And so perhaps the young man at this point isn't really reflecting on his heart. He's reflecting on how he's lived his life externally to people to see and feel very comfortable. The young man said, well, what else do I need to do? I've done all these things. And Jesus tells him to go sell what you have and distribute it to the poor and come follow me. And he says this, but he precedes it with, if you want to be made perfect, do this. So Jesus is saying, if you want to be made perfect, sell what you have, give to the poor, and come follow me. Of course, we know the young man turned around and went away because he had much wealth. And so the one thing that he had within that he clung to when he was offered a path for eternity, for perfection, he turned away because the earthly wealth mattered more to him than his eternal destiny. And I think we're all challenged with this examples in our lives. To some, it may not be money or wealth. It may be pride. It may be envy. It may be covetousness. It may be hedonism, lustfulness. It may be things that we give ourselves a pass because in the world in which we live, the world is telling us these are things you should desire. these are things you need to be part of if you want to be viewed as successful within this world. And so Jesus, as in the young man, as in the woman by the well, the Samaritan, as in Jurgis, as in yourself, he finds these weak spots within us that we reserve for ourselves and may not be willing to give up. But he tells us, if you want to be made perfect, give these things up and follow me. And so in Orthodoxy, there's a process in which I think makes all the difference in the world in terms of our theology, and that is the concept of theosis, in which which we can transform ourselves to become more like God here, and to receive blessings in the understanding of this process here, as we go almost spiritually from a caterpillar to a spiritual butterfly, that Jesus tells us, shows us that if we're willing to make these decisions, willing to trust Him, willing to put the treasures, the heavenly treasures, to be made perfect above the things that the world is telling us we should ascribe to or aspire to, that we need to reveal these things in our heart that we're keeping, our pride, our envy, our arrogance, our sinfulness in so many different ways, again. And we need to explain this. We need to expose this. I thought that this transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly in many ways gives us hope of what is possible in our lives here as we experiencing our walk, our daily walk, our pilgrimage here on earth. Don't lose sight on what's possible. The world will tell us easy, there's time for this later. There are more important things you need to do. And so I would encourage you not to turn and walk away because something is much more important to you. I pray as we all struggle with these temptations and with these decisions in our lives that we'll again reflect upon the possibility of theosis here as well as eternity in heaven. So I'm looking forward to seeing, again, the Fathers in West Virginia. If you've not been to the Hermitage of the Holy Cross, they're in the process of completing a very beautiful church. And I think if you got an opportunity to visit their website or their Facebook page to see what they're doing there, and I would also encourage you to make a trip out there to contact the guest master and see what's going on in West Virginia. And perhaps when I'm out there, I can maybe film something, God willing, to share with you when I return. So I hope you're doing well, and I look forward to talking to you on the next Orthodox Gardener.